Hi there, Dave Tobin here at mercedesmarket.com. Today we're going to talk about the W111 series coupes from Mercedes Benz, the 220 SE, the 250 SE, and the 280 SE. We're going to stick to the 6-cylinder cars. We'll leave the 3.5 V8s for some other discussion. I talked to a lot of people about these cars. I recently had a 220 SE for sale, and while people would call and we'd talk about that particular car, the performance characteristics of the 220 would come up, and the collectability of a 220 versus a 250 versus a 280 would come up as well. So those are really popular topics that people seem to hash out over and over again. The same thing seems to happen for the SL series, 230 SLs, 250s, and 280s. So I am of the opinion, and my premise is basically that these days, based on how we use these cars, there isn't a big enough performance difference between the 6-cylinder cars to exclude any of them from your decision in buying. So I got some horsepower numbers from this book by Brian Long, Mercedes Benz Fintail models, 110, 111, and 112, published in 2014. It's a great book. It goes through all the sedans as well as coupes. I looked online and a bunch of different places looking for hard horsepower numbers, but sometimes they're SAE numbers, sometimes they're DIN numbers. There are various ways to measure horsepower, various bodies that seem to preside over the actual facts. So I'm going to use what he used in this book. At least we'll keep it even. So the 220 SE with the M127 series engine develops 120 DIN horsepower, and DIN is an acronym for Deutsche Industrie Nummern or something like that. So it's a German measure. It's the German standard, which isn't all that different from SAE. So we're going to stick with the DIN number all the way through. 220 SE, 120 horsepower DIN. The 250 SE has 150 horsepower, so 30 more. And then the 280 has 160 horsepower, just 10 more than the 250, but 40 more than the 220. Other differences in the engines there are a number of differences. One of the main ones is the main bearings on the crankshaft. And you have a 4 main bearing engine with the 220, the M127 engine. The 250 has 7 main bearings in the M129. The M130 engine that's in the 280 SE also has 7 main bearings. So the 250 and 280 are a little more robust, but again, behind the wheel of the car today, as you're driving down the road, I think you'd have a hard time telling me which car you were driving if you couldn't see the numbers on the back of it. Braking between these different cars is different. The 220 has disc brakes in front, drums in the rear. With the 250, they moved to discs all the way around, and the 280 has discs all the way around. But in general, they aren't all that different. Weight, they're about 2,300 pounds. I think the 220 is about 2,100 pounds, I'm sorry. The 250 is about 2,200 pounds, and the 280 is about 2,300 pounds. So they went up about 100 pounds each as they were developing the car. The way we drive these cars today, so if you're going to drive to a car show or whatever, I just don't think that you can tell that big of a difference between these 3 cars, enough so that if you're considering one of these coupes, it depends on your budget, it depends what your goals are, how do you want to use the car, but they're all pretty solid, they're very similar, and it's worth looking at all 3 and finding the best example that you can afford. If the best one you can afford is a 220, I think it's better to have a more correct, nicer 220 than having a ratty, beat up 280 that might be incorrect. So I would suggest looking at these cars as a whole and then finding the best one of the group that you'd like to take home.